Now it's time to bring in economist Dr. Art Laffer. He's the founder and chairman of Laffer Associates, an institutional economic research and consulting firm. Dr. Laffer also served as an advisor to then candidate Donald Trump back in 2006, and he later published the book Trumponomics, Inside the America First Plan to get our economy back on track. Art, thanks for coming back and being a guest of ours right here on the Income Generation.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So, your personal opinion. Let's grade the president. How has he done economically so far in his first 2 years and 10 months or so in office?
Well, very quickly, just go through the 5 pillars of prosperity. On tax side, he's done the best ever. It's the best first term ever. That tax bill that passed in December 22nd on 2017 is fantastic, and it's led to enormous prosperity. On deregulation, he's been the best ever as well. I mean, this is amazing, especially in healthcare, energy. I mean, incredible. On government spending, he hasn't done much. I mean, we need to have a full Congress and president to do something about spending, and that's still a problem. If you look at monetary policy, I think it's okay. I think Jeremy Powell has done pretty well. I know the president bashes him a little bit, and he could probably do a lot better if he followed the president's advice. But trade is the one that's a work in progress. I think the president's doing well. I mean, USMCA is a great deal. I think he's got a great deal coming with Japan. I think if you look at South Korea, there's a good one coming there. But the big one, the big issue is China. And I think they're going to do it in steps. But this could be a barn burner. If he did the right deal with China, that could be an enormous boost to U.S. prosperity and Chinese prosperity. So
Art, would you say that when it comes to this so-called trade war, do we have the upper hand? I know a lot of people I talk to say we do have the upper hand over China because our economy seems to be faring better than theirs throughout this whole ordeal. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's not the way I like to look at it. I mean, I don't think it's the upper hand or not. It's like two guys fighting in the street. If they both fight, they're both going to lose. Now, one may lose more than the other, but this is not an upper hand. We win, they lose, they win, we lose. That's not the way it is. Both of us will win or both of us will lose is the way I look at it. It's the gains from trade, comparative advantage, David Ricardo. Chinese tariffs on U.S. products hurt China. U.S. tariffs on Chinese products hurt the U.S. There's no win, lose, lose, win. It's a gain from trade. And what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do, I hope, is get the other to see that it's a win-win for all parties. And so therefore, I would not view it as a conflict, our upper hand, their lower hand, whatever. I would view it as a win-win for all.
So bottom line, do you feel as though the trade war is really unwinnable? Even if we appear to win on paper, we've still lost essentially?
Yeah, it's not a trade war is the way I would not. Now, I've watched trade wars historically, and everyone loses, and they lose really big. The U.S. stock market, after May of 1930, when the Smoot-Hawley tariff was signed into law, the stock market fell by over 90%, David. That's a bad problem. I mean, it led to the Great Depression. I was in the White House with Nixon. I was George Shultz's right-hand person in the OMB, and when he put on the 10% surcharge, the investment tax credit and all that applied only to American products, devalued the dollar, we had the stock market fall by over 50%. We had the second worst economy since the Great Depression. So it's a lose for everyone if we don't get a good deal with China.
So 30 seconds, what could the president have done differently then other than this so-called trade war?
I'm going to just pull back on that. The president's the negotiator in chief. I really don't understand negotiations. I really shouldn't comment on him because he's done a great job so far in everything on economics. I mean, I can't tell you how wonderful a job he's done on the economy.
Fair enough. Smart man, I wouldn't want to negotiate against the president either. So no. We need to take a quick commercial break here, Art, so please stay with us. And you stay with us too. We'll be back here in just a moment, right here on the Income Generation. Now it's time to bring back in economist, good friend of the Income Generation, Dr. Art Laffer. I want to start by congratulating you and letting our viewers know that you recently were awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom just in June for your work in economics. So first of all, congratulations on behalf of the Income Generation.
Thank you. I don't deserve it, but I'm not giving it back.
Humility. I love the humility. That's right.
It was really a great honor. I was very honored to get it.
That's right. You'll take the trophy no matter what. So let's talk about monetary policy.
Sure.
You actually made a comment that you think the Fed should probably listen to the president more, although technically the Fed is really supposed to be detached. So what do you think the Fed could be doing better, whether they listen to the president or not?
Well, I don't think the Fed should be detached. It shouldn't be like any other agency, be it an administrative agency, but that's not the way it is. When you look at the Fed, they are not only doing something for the United States, but they live in a world economy. Interest rates are determined on a global scale, not just in the U.S. So we have very low interest rates because the economies of foreign countries are doing very badly. We have low interest rates, inverted yield curves, all of that. Not because of the U.S. We're doing great. So when they look at policies, I think they should consider much more seriously what's happening abroad and therefore should lower rates more than they have already. I think that would be good for the U.S. because, I mean, gold prices are way too high. They don't make any sense for the U.S. But if you're in Europe or Asia, they make lots of sense. And gold prices are the same there as they are here. So, you know, I think the Fed should be much more cognizant of the global economy and how well we're doing relative to the rest of the world and how important it is for them to make sure that we're not at a competitive disadvantage with other countries because other countries have lower rates. That's what I'd really like them to do.
But it sounds like you're saying the Fed raised rates maybe too long when they're raising rates and,
Yes.
and too long and too much. But now the question is, you know, what do we do? I mean, if most of the
Lower
world
rates.
turns negative interest rates, should we go negative interest rates? You know, my mom
if
always
we
told
lower-
me, if your friend jumps off a bridge, will you? So should we
No,
go
no,
negative
no.
because they do?
No, you shouldn't go negative because they do. But what happens is our curve, because we have higher rates than the rest of the world, because the Fed has been tighter here and kept the short rate much higher than the rest of the world, if we dropped our rates, we would not have an inverted yield curve. It would be just the reverse. It would make our yield curve much more positive, which is much more prone to economic growth. I mean, banks borrow short-term, they lend long-term. If you've got short-term rates that are way too high, it disturbs the lending market. All of that can be corrected by the Fed if they wanted to, and if they didn't feel pressured to do it. I think they do it.
You know,
in
Art,
a
that's what I love about you, the common sense aspect of economics. I had so many economists on here who told me, no, we're not worried about a flat or inverted yield curve because this time it was because of, not because of lack of demand for goods and services, it was because of everything going on abroad. And I said, yeah, but this flat yield curve can be causative, as you said. Banks won't want to land in that environment. So I'd like to just get started in the 30 seconds or so we have left here, asking you about what happened with the liquidity crisis in banks starting on September 16th. I don't believe the excuses I've heard as to why it's happened. Why do you think it's happened in 30 seconds?
I don't think there's a liquidity crisis on banks right now. I just think everything is just fine. I think the banks have stopped trying to reduce their balance sheet and are now into a modest expansion of it again. You know, that's a minor move, I think, either way, and I wouldn't get too worried about that. I think banks are doing just fine. And I think the bank relationships with the rest of the economy are great, and we have a good Fed that will propel us forward. If they listen to the president more, it'll even be better.
If they listen. I don't think they will, but if they do.
You know,
all right. We're going to take one more commercial break. Stay with us, please. We'll be back in a minute. And you stay with us, too. We have much more here coming up on the Income Generation. All right, time to bring back in just one more time Dr. Art Laffer. Art, thanks for sticking around.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So you mentioned at the beginning spending, that the government could have done more with spending. Talk about that, please. Let us know what you think they could be doing better.
Milton Friedman made the point that government spending is taxation, and it is. Government doesn't create resources, government redistributes resources. So every dollar spent by the government is a dollar taken from someone else, either borrowed or taxed away. That's the truth. So government spending is a huge tax. A country cannot spend itself into prosperity. That's silly. And what we need to do is get spending under control, especially entitlements and those. And the administration and Congress have had no appetite for controlling of spending. There's just no appetite there, and they haven't done it. And that's the biggest shortfall, I think, of this administration and this Congress.
Of course, I have to ask you, the Laffer curve, something for which you'd become famous, one of the many things, says today, what is the ideal tax rate to get the most revenues for the government?
Well, let me just say the ideal tax rate is not the one that gets the most revenues. That would be one that did a lot of damage to the economy. It has to be way below the most revenues rate, period. So it creates the prosperity, the growth. I mean, you don't want to create unemployment so you have more welfare payments. That's not what you want.
What would that tax rate be today then that gives that best balance?
You know, I did Jerry Brown's flat tax in 1992, where we got rid of all federal taxes and had two taxes, one on business net sales, value added, and one on personal unadjusted gross income. If you look at both of those two, from the first dollar to the last dollar, and replaced every federal tax, the rate would have been 13% that Jerry ran on, and that would be without any Laffer curve effect. That would be just that. Can you imagine what this economy would look like with two 13% flat tax rates, one on business net sales and one on personal unadjusted gross income? You don't even have to file a tax return. The companies will pay the taxes and send you the after-tax amount. It would just, we'd be to the moon.
So tell me though, can we survive on that today? Has the national debt gotten too far out of control where we can't survive on that? Or can we? Is it too late or not?
It's never too late. We're in fine shape. We're not in fine shape. I wish the debt were a lot lower. Let me just start with that. But I don't think the debt should be an impediment to doing good economics, and especially at these low interest rates. If you look at debt service as a share of GDP, it's half what it was in 1981. So we can do a lot right now without being terrified of the debt. Now, we want to keep that debt down. Don't get me wrong. Please don't make me say it's not a problem. But right now, debt service as a share of GDP is not a big problem.
It's one thing that helps the low interest rates for sure. We need to leave it there. Dr. Laffer, so much for being on the show once again. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.